How do you conquer the world when there are no roads, no highways, no supply lines, no way to march an army 15,000 kilometers across an ocean? For 3,000 years, empires moved on wheels. Chariots rolled across Mesopotamia. Siege engines topped city walls. Roman legions marched on roads. Empires rose and fell on axles and spokes. But wheels need roads, and roads have borders. How did the Dutch find a way around it? Hey, hoi, welcome to the Dutch door. Kom erin. Ga je mee? The Vikings tried a different approach. Long ships. They didn't need roads. They had rivers and coasts. They could strike anywhere, faster than any army could march, from Scandinavia to Constantinople, Iceland to North America. But long ships were built for raids, not empires. Small crews, light cargo. They could burn a monastery and disappear. But they couldn't hold territory, couldn't move bulk goods, couldn't build lasting power. So how did a tiny nation with no army, no gold, and no natural resources become the richest country on earth in just 50 years? Last time, we saw how the Dutch solved the first problem, production. Cornelis Corneliszoon's wind-powered sawmill, 1594. Timber production increased by 30 times. The factory was ready, now they needed the product. The answer was built in a shipyard in 1595. In Hoorn, a small Dutch town, craftsmen built something that would change everything. Not a warship, a merchant vessel, the fluyt. First, the hull. It didn't look like the ships of its time, and that was the point. Rounder, wider at the waterline, sharp at the deck. Not for beauty, for physics. More space below meant more cargo. Less surface above meant less drag from the wind. The result? 50% more capacity. The Portuguese carack, the English galleon, they were instantly outdated. The fluyt wasn't a warship, it was a profit machine. Second, the rigging. Gone were the forts of ropes and sails, simpler pulleys, streamlined rigging. One sailor could do the work of two. That meant smaller crews, fewer mouths to feed, lower costs. Every voyage became cheaper, faster, and more efficient. It was shipping, redesigned. Third, there was the draft. Flat-bottomed, shallow, the fluyt could slip through Dutch rivers, glide across the North Sea, and still cross an ocean. While Spanish galleons got stuck in deep harbors, the fluyt sailed right past them, trading where others couldn't reach. This wasn't just a new ship, it was a revolution in wood and wind, the perfect partner to the Dutch windmill. But there was still a problem. Speed means nothing if you don't know where you're going. The Vikings had conquered coasts, but they couldn't navigate precisely. They hugged coastlines, followed landmarks, read the stars on clear nights. But in open ocean, in storms, in fog, you were guessing, and guessing meant lost ships, lost cargo, lost profit. The Dutch needed certainty, and they found it in mathematics. The tools themselves weren't entirely new. The cross staff or Jacob's staff had been around since the 14th century. A simple device, a long wooden staff with a sliding crosspiece. You'd point it at the sun, adjust the crosspiece until it aligned with the horizon, then read the angle on the staff. That angle told you your latitude. The Portuguese had been using it since 1515. But Portuguese instruments were crude, hand-carved, inconsistent markings. Good enough for coastal navigation, not good enough for crossing 15,000 kilometers of open ocean. So around 1590, Dutch mathematicians and instrument makers began refining the design. Thomas Hood published improved cross-staff designs with precision graduated scales. Every degree mattered. Every minute of arc mattered. Then in 1594, the same year as the windmill, an Englishman named John Davis invented the backstaff. It solved a critical problem. With the cross staff, you had to stare directly at the sun. Navigators were going blind. The backstaff used the sun's shadow instead. You turned your back to the sun, aligned the shadow with the horizon. Safer, more accurate. The Dutch immediately adopted it. and then improved it. In 1660, a Dutch VOC provisions master named Joost van Breen invented the spiegelboog, the mirror staff. It used reflection, making measurements even more precise. First navigation instrument to use mirrors, 40 years before Newton's reflecting quadrant. But instruments were only half the equation. You still needed to know where the sun should be at any given moment, what angle, what position in the sky. For that, you needed tables, declination tables, solar positions for every day of the year. The Spanish had crude versions. The Portuguese copied them from old Arab sources, riddled with errors. The Dutch calculated new ones. Mathematicians in Amsterdam, working with astronomers, working with the VOC, created declination tables accurate to within minutes of arc. They updated them constantly. Every voyage brought new data. Every captain's log was analyzed, corrections made, errors eliminated. A Portuguese captain had tables from 1560, copied by hand, full of mistakes. A Dutch captain had printed tables from 1630, updated every 5 years, checked against actual observations from hundreds of voyages. That's the difference between losing 1 ship in 3 or losing 1 ship in 10. And then there were the maps. Willem Janszoon Blauw, born 1571, he trained as an astronomer under Tycho Brahe in Denmark in the 1590s, the same year the first fluits were being built. When Blauw returned to Amsterdam in 1599, he started making globes, then instruments, and then maps. In 1633, he was appointed official cartographer to the Dutch East India Company. This was the key. Every VOC ship, Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, the Dutch East India Company, that sailed to Asia kept detailed logs, currents, depths, reefs, wind patterns, distances. All of it went back to Amsterdam. All of it went to Blauw. He didn't just copy Portuguese charts, he corrected them. Portuguese maps showed Java one way. Blauw's maps, based on 50 Dutch voyages, showed it accurately, down to individual harbors, down to specific anchorages. In 1635, Blauw published the Theatrum Orbis Terrarum, the Theater of the World, one of the greatest atlases ever made. By 1662, his son Joon had expanded it to Atlas Major, 11 volumes, 593 hand-colored maps, the most expensive book you could buy in the 17th century, the most accurate maps in the world. And they were locked up in Amsterdam. The VOC kept master charts in a vault. Only company captains had access to the updated versions. It was a competitive advantage worth more than gold. A Portuguese captain knew the route to the Spice Islands by memory and prayer. A Dutch captain knew it by mathematics. You could measure the sun's angle with a backstaff to within 1 degree. You could look up its expected position in a declination table to within 2 minutes of arc. You could plot your course on Blauw's chart accurate to within a few miles. And that's the difference between guessing and knowing, between hoping and calculating, between arrival and oblivion. The Dutch sailed 15,000 kilometers to Indonesia, the Spice Islands, the Moluccas, nutmeg, cloves, mace, worth more than gold in Europe. The Portuguese thought they owned the islands. They'd been there for a century. They had forts, cannons, galleons. But they were wrong. Dutch fluits could outrun Portuguese galleons, undercut their prices, and when necessary, outgun them. Because the fluyt wasn't just a cargo ship. The VOC armed them, turned merchants into warships at a moment's notice. By 1619, the Dutch controlled Jakarta. By the 1660s, they'd expelled the Portuguese from most of Southeast Asia. Within 50 years, the VOC, Dutch East India Company, became the most valuable corporation in history, 6 times larger than Apple at its peak, adjusted for inflation. And it wasn't just Indonesia. The fluyt went everywhere. The Baltic for grain, the Caribbean for sugar, New Amsterdam, now New York, Cape Town, Ceylon, Suriname. Wherever there was profit, there was a fluyt, and a captain who knew exactly how to get there and back. By 1650, the Netherlands had 16,000 merchant ships, more than England, France, Spain, and Portugal combined. The Dutch became the richest nation on earth. In the 1650s, tiny Netherlands, no bigger than Vancouver Island, Canada, had more wealth than France or Spain. Amsterdam was the financial capital of the world, the first stock exchange, the first multinational corporation, the first true global economy, all because of a boat. 5 centuries later, the Dutch are still building boats, not fluyts anymore, super yachts. In 2024, the Netherlands was the world's largest builder of super yachts over 80 meters long. One of the Dutch companies, considered the Rolls-Royce of yacht builders, just launched Project 821, the first hydrogen-powered super yacht and the largest yacht ever built in the Netherlands. From Saudi princes to tech billionaires, if you want the most advanced vessel on earth, you go to the Dutch. The same craftsmanship that built fluyts in Hoorn is building the future of maritime engineering today. From the spice trade to zero-emission exploration yachts, the legacy continues. Next time, the Spice Islands, the VOC, and the hidden price of an empire.